Welcome, friends, to the Lead Well, Live Whole podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sermon, and it's an honor to journey with you. This podcast is a heart-to-heart conversation about what it truly means to lead well, not just professionally, but personally and spiritually too. Here, we believe leadership isn't something you put on with your suit on Monday morning and take off Friday afternoon. Real leadership starts within.
This is my time.
Ready? Welcome back to the Lead Well, Live Whole podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sermon, and I'm grateful you're here. If you joined us for episode 1, we laid the foundation for what it means to lead from within. Today, we're building on that with a powerful and essential topic, self-leadership. Because before you can lead a team, shape a culture, or inspire change, you must first learn to lead yourself. But what is self-leadership? Well, the definition's simple. Self-leadership is the practice of intentionally influencing your thoughts, behaviors, and choices to align with your values and goals. Simply put, it's that unseen work, the decisions that no one applauds, the habits that no one tracks, and the growth that no one posts about. In all of our lives, we can reflect back to a time that we did something that really was not a representation of who we were. But a lot of times it is a result of those conversations that we have inside. We respond the wrong way. We say the wrong thing. We snap when we shouldn't snap. I remember when my boys were younger and I was coaching their baseball team, or the oldest son's baseball team. We were out and I knew what that team was capable of. I knew how good they really were. But yet they showed up that day. They were lethargic. They were making boneheaded mistakes. They were just not behaving in the manner that I knew that they should be, that they were not playing to their potential. And I'm a very competitive person, but typically I'm also normally pretty patient, especially when it came to the kids. Now, the boys will probably disagree with that, but I think compared to what could have happened, I think I was very patient. But I remember that day I was out and they were doing whatever. And I remember pulling my son to the side and just snapping at him, telling him to pull his head out of his armpit. And the look that came over his face, how crushed he looked in that moment. Then, of course, the angry daggers that were coming from my wife didn't help any. But Tammy walked over. She pulled me to the side and she said, "This is not who you are." And that was enough to make me step back and realize this really was just a game, right? I was out with the intent of helping to teach the boys about sportsmanship, self-control, how to play as a team. And they didn't hear a single word I said because all they could see was that reaction that I was having that was completely out of character for me. But it all started with those inner conversations. It all started with how I had primed myself before we ever even went out on the field, because I was making the game about me and not about them. So if you think about that, what it means to really lead others and how we learn from the wins and the defeats in our life, it makes me sit back and think, as people, as competitive people driven to be successful, especially if you have a natural leadership bone in you, We often get pushed, or we push ourselves to jump into leadership roles long before we're ready, long before we've mastered ourselves. But what I've learned over the last 30 plus years of leadership is that without that self leadership, without establishing the internal rhythms and disciplines that even the most gifted people, even the most talented people are eventually going to crumble. They're going to crumble under the weight of inconsistency. They're going to burn out, or they're going to crumble under ethical compromise. You see it all around you. We read about it in the news. We see the people who have quickly risen to leadership roles that within a year or two, you're finding out something that now has pulled them down from their position. But the reality is that can be avoided, right? We can we can as leaders, male, female, young, old, no matter what your race is, no matter what the position is, we can build those core components of self-leadership. We can establish a stronghold and a core of disciplines from which we operate that give us a better shot of success without that compromise, without that crumble, with the foundation remaining solid. And honestly, the first core discipline for me is clarity. Know who you are, know what you stand for, and know where you're going. Because honestly, if I know who I am and I establish my identity, no one gets to determine that for me. If I'm a man of character and not just a character, I get to decide who I am in private and in public. I get to know what I stand for. And if I'm consistent in it and I'm continuing to drive toward that person who I want to be, that man that I want to be, that leader I want to be, that husband I want to be, that father, that grandfather, that friend, and I'm consistent in that approach, no one, no one can push me from that path unless I choose to move from that path. Early in my life, I understood, and I tried to teach this to my sons and everybody that I'm in a position to speak to. I've tried to teach this principle. You cannot control anyone else. You can't control their actions. You can't control their words. You can't control their attitudes. The only person that you can control, the only person you can change is yourself. And no matter what they do, no matter what they say, they cannot make you act outside of your character unless you choose to step outside of your character. The next thing, once you know who you are, what you're standing for, and where you're going, is discipline. It's that muscle of leadership, right? It's showing up even when it's hard, when it's easy to do the wrong thing, when it's easy to compromise, when it's easy to take the shortcut. That discipline says, no, that's not who I am. That's not what I stand for. I remember it was probably less than a year ago, I moved to the carnivore diet. And because I needed to lose some weight, and then I really did, I lost some weight and I felt really good doing it, still do. But I remember early on when I would I'd get a craving for something, and muscle memory would have me reach out to start to grab it, and normally it involved a cinnamon roll. And I remember I had to start telling myself, that's not who you are. That's not what you do. And then I started applying that to other things in my life, right? When when I'd get angry and I'd want to, throw out a cuss word, catch myself. That's not who you are. That's not what you do. And cause myself to step back, or allow myself to step back and take a breath and respond rather than react. The third element really is emotional intelligence, the one that most men want to run away from, which is managing your emotions and your reactions. For some reason, we think that the loudest person is actually the strongest leader, and that's not true. They're just the loudest person. The person who gets angry is passionate. That's not true. The one who gets angry lacks the discipline to control their anger. They find it easier to lash out than to actually guide the conversation or the people or the situation to where it needs to be. Don't get me wrong, there's times anger is appropriate. But if the only tool in your belt is a hammer, then you need to get a bigger tool belt. The last leg really is, for me, it's about integrity. That's living in alignment with the other three elements we talked about. Living in alignment with them when no one else is watching. Who you are in private is who you are in public. What you practice in private is what you're going to reveal in public. One of my mentors constantly says, you can fool anyone for a year, but who you are will eventually be found out. I've found most of the time when I'm trying to live a double life, which I'm not good at because I'm not smart enough for that. Most of the time when that's happening, the only person I'm fooling is myself. Most of the people I've worked with, no matter what the arena, the ones who were deceiving themselves, everyone else was aware. But they lived in a bubble that they thought nobody else saw it. I don't care what's going on in your life, how well you think you've hidden it. You're the only one that's being deceived by it. You can fool everybody for a while, but eventually they'll find out. So it's easier. Find that integrity. It's a muscle that's there. Work that muscle. Gain the strength. And walk in a manner and walk in a way that's consistent with who you really want to be. You have to unlearn some bad habits sometimes to learn the new habits, but you have to choose to do it and not give in to that emotional response, not give in to that whim of this is what my body wants or this would feel good at the moment. And stop and think, for this blow up, will this matter in 100 years? And I'm going to promise you most of the time, no, it won't. So I want to encourage you to ask yourself this. Am I leading my life, or is my life leading me? It's an important question. And if the answer is your life is leading you, you know what? That's okay. There's some practical things you can do to strengthen your self-leadership, to get control of your life, to get control of your calendar, of your schedule, your emotions, your thoughts, your body. First of all, start your day with intention, not with your inbox. Don't immediately grab your phone. Don't immediately jump up and run to that next meeting, or don't roll out of bed thinking about what you have to do step by step throughout the day. Pause. Take a few moments. Take 5 minutes. Take 30 seconds. Take 5 seconds. When you first wake up, stop. Breathe. Ask yourself, who do I want to be today? What kind of leader do I want to be? What kind of a man? What kind of a woman? What kind of a mother? What kind of a father? What kind of a friend? What kind of a spouse? And once you set that goal in your mind, once you set that goal in your heart, then you can begin setting micro goals. And that one of those first micro goals may be, I'm not going to get angry when something goes wrong. My first micro goal was I'm not going to get mad when somebody cuts me off in traffic. I'm not going to go into a fit of rage because they dared to take my spot in line. And that was hard because I developed a habit, right? The anonymity of being behind the wheel. I had allowed myself to become angry and take it personal when most of the time they were so involved in their phone or so involved in some conversation or a cup of coffee, they weren't even aware that I was there. Defensive driving is a real thing. But your micro goals, like all SMART goals, they have to align with your big picture. You're not going to become who you want to be overnight. And I'll be honest with you, from experience, if you ever get to where you are who you want to be, you're going to find a different version that you're going to continue growing for, because this is not a one and done thing. This is not a journey that ever ends. This is every day getting better, every day getting stronger, every day getting smarter, every day learning yourself, learning your triggers, and learning how to counter those triggers so that you can respond and not react. And then weekly, daily, however it works for you, set some time aside and reflect. What went wrong? What went right? Be honest. Remember, if you're lying to anybody, you're only lying to yourself. Everybody around you knows what went wrong. They know when you were a jerk. They know when you weren't a jerk. They notice when you start behaving different. And if you were really a world-class jerk and suddenly you're trying not to be, you're trying to act with more emotional intelligence, for a while, they're going to be nervous and they're going to wonder when you're going to snap, because habit and past pattern says you'll be good for a while, then you'll snap. But you know what? That's not who you are anymore, because you've made a decision. Next is to build a regular rhythm, build a cadence of rest and renewal. When you run and run and run and run to the point of exhaustion, it makes it easier for your emotions to take over. It makes it easier for you to not exercise the muscles, easier to not do the hard work about being intentional about who you want to be and who you are. It makes it easier to not put in the effort to get rid of the junk so that true you can be seen. Then stay accountable to someone who can hold you to task when you fail, and someone who cheers for you. I remember I was working with a coach one time and went through this whole thing, and finally we got done and the coach said, well, based off all this, you're really a jerk. And I started laughing. I said, no, I'm a very nice guy. He said, no, that's the worst kind. You're a nice jerk, which confused me. How can you be a nice jerk? Well, it turns out that I had a habit of using sarcasm, right? When I would get frustrated, I would use sarcasm. I was being cute, fun, and witty, but really it wasn't. It was hurtful and it was painful, and it was intentional on my part without being conscious of the intention, but it was intentional. And what I discovered at that time, that I think it was the Greek origin of sarcasm, actually means rending of flesh. So I actually went to my team and I pulled my team in and I said, all right, gentlemen, I've just learned I'm a jerk. And they started laughing. They're like, you just now figured that out? I said, well, yes, I did, because I wasn't aware that I was. I thought I was being fun and interactive and all those things. I said, but I need a favor from you. I'm trying to make an effort not to be that guy. So I need you to help hold me accountable. And I empowered the team to call me out when I would start using sarcasm. And it forced me to find another tool to communicate with when I was frustrated, when I wasn't getting what I was needing, or when we weren't going in the right direction. And then I also pulled my family together and I asked them to hold me accountable. Now it turns out my sons were just as sarcastic as I was, so it made it kind of a challenge, but it's not a challenge that's insurmountable. What I've learned over the years is the world doesn't need more perfect leaders. In fact, there's no such thing as a perfect leader. What the world needs are consistent leaders. What your children need are consistent parents. What your spouse needs is a consistent partner. And that consistency, it's going to start with the small, quiet, unseen disciplines of self-leadership. I'm confident you have it in you. I think you're a great leader. I think you have the ability to step up and be exactly who you want to be, that you're willing and able and wanting to put in the hard work that's needed. Thank you for turning into episode 2. And remember, before you can lead others well, you must first lead yourself with integrity, with vision, and with grace. And if this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to share it, rate the show, and connect with me online. I'm available on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and wherever I know Spotify, Amazon, Audible, even YouTube podcasts. Reach out. Let me know your story. But until next time, this is your host, Michael Sermon, reminding you to lead well and live whole. You were built to serve and made to thrive. So thank you for joining me on this journey. I'm excited for the conversations we'll have and the growth we'll experience together. If this resonates with you, be sure to subscribe, share with your community, and stay tuned for future episodes where we'll continue unpacking what it truly means to lead well and live whole. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Remember, leadership that changes the world starts right where you are, right now. Until next time, this is your host, Michael Sermon, reminding you, lead well, live whole. You're built to serve and made to thrive. Take care, friends.